Hi everyone, this is Rebecca from ChemKnits, and today I'm doing something that I haven't done for a while. I am winding a ball of yarn by hand so that way we can dye a completely hand wound ball of yarn to get an asymmetric colorway. Ever since I bought a crank ball winder, I haven't done a lot of hand winding of my yarn, purely because it's easier to use the ball winder, and I really like the convenience of the center pull ball. However, when we're dyeing yarn with when we're dyeing a full yarn cake, a center pull yarn cake that we made from the ball winder, the way that the yarn is positioned is very different from a hand wound ball. Because in the hand wound ball, the yarn at the center is going to be very much less accessible to the dye than the yarn that we have on the outside. Now you can see that I'm putting multiple fingers in between the ball and the yarn as I'm winding it, because I'm trying to wind this as loosely as I can with hope that we will see some dye penetration, maybe not all the way to the center, but somewhat to the center. And so with luck, we will get a really cool asymmetric yarn with maybe a bit of a gradient. Even towards the end of the ball, I'm still making an effort to keep all my fingers through the yarn as I am winding it, so that way I can do this as loosely as possible. We now have our completely wound ball of yarn, and so we're ready to add it to a dye bath to start dyeing it. My pot is heating up and it's about half full of water. I have not yet added any vinegar or any other acid source. I want to add the dye, then add the yarn, and then after 5 minutes or so add the vinegar to see if this will give some time to allow some of the dye to penetrate the center of the ball. So today, for dye, I want to mix Wilton's Violet and Wilton's Delphinium Blue. Both of these are colors that we know break absolutely beautifully, and so I think that they should give us some really pretty results. Okay, I'm going to add about a 1/4 teaspoon of Wilton's Violet food coloring. And as always, I am wearing, oh man, dissolving this in hot water is significantly easier. I am wearing gloves purely to protect my hands from dyeing them blue and purple. And I'm also going to add a 1/4, if I can get in there, yeah, a 1/4 teaspoon of Delphinium Blue. The Delphinium Blue, in addition to blue number 1 and red number 3, actually has some yellow as well, so I think that this will be quite beautiful. We're at a bubble. I'm going to reduce the heat. Now, I would like to submerge the entire ball, and I'm going to use a slotted spoon. The yarn is still dry, and I have some hot water on standby in case we need more volume. But if I just add the yarn without any help, you can see that it floats. So as I am submerging it, that's a pretty color. Okay, so here you can, right here, the ball is at the bottom of the pot, so I will need to add some more water. But you can see, wow! Do you see when I poured the water on the yarn? That pink is striking right away, but the blues have not really started to strike yet. That, my friends, is really cool. That is really, really, really cool. Yeah, I mean, it's possible. I haven't checked the pH of my water at home, but it's possible that the pinks just strike. The water's acidic enough that the pinks can just strike even without any other acid being present. That is awesome. Alright, I am going to let this go. Actually, I'll add a tiny bit more water. check that out. If I were to remove it right now, the blues would wash out and we'd be left with this pink. That is so cool. All right, we now can have our ball totally submerged. I'm gonna let this go, even though it's still kind of floating. I think that's okay. It'll give some nice, cool variation for the outside, but maybe I should turn it occasionally, I don't know. I haven't quite decided. Anyway, I guess I'll leave it as is. I'm gonna let this go ahead and stay in the heat for 5 minutes, and then we'll come back. 5 minutes have passed, and our yarn is looking very, very pink. The dye bath still has a lot of color in it, which isn't surprising because we haven't added vinegar yet. And it still reads as somewhat purple. But I'm now gonna add 2 tablespoons of white vinegar. We are at just below a simmer. Oop. Eek. Eek. Yarn. Okay. I didn't splash too far. Just below a simmer. So it is very hot. And if we need to, if we're having trouble seeing the dye clear, I can always add more vinegar later. But it is never a bad thing to add vinegar slowly, and I'm so curious how far into the ball of yarn this will penetrate. So I will come back in another 10 minutes. 10 minutes have passed, and we've got our bright, bright blue. If we look at the ball, it looks like we've got a really nice deep purple with the little bit above the surface being a tad bit pinker. I am so curious about how far the dye has or has not penetrated the yarn, but I'm actually going to reduce the heat so our bubbles lessen, and then I am going to let this go another 10 minutes and see if the dye starts to clear, and if it doesn't, then I'll add even a little more vinegar. It has been a total of 20 minutes since we added the vinegar to our dye pot. And a lot of the color has exhausted, but there's still a little left. It may not exhaust completely because it looks like the color on the outside of the yarn is really saturated. So I'm really excited to see what this will look like. But I'm going to go ahead and add two more tablespoons of vinegar to just help things along, because if it's gonna absorb, then it'll do it after this vinegar, and otherwise, you know, we will remove the yarn and start letting it to cool. But I'm now gonna let this sit another 10 minutes and we'll see if we can absorb the last little bit of dye. That extra 10 minutes did not make a huge difference, although the water does seem slightly less blue on the amount of dye absorbed. But I want to let this yarn cool in the pot. I'm going to turn off the heat and let this come down to room temperature sort of slowly. More dye might absorb during this time, but it's also just a convenient way to let things cool off. The dye bath is still a bit warm, but I am going to remove the yarn. Look at how dark this exterior is. Oh yeah, I can comfortably reach my hands in. And I'm even gonna squeeze it, and that actually feels nice and loose. Ooh. Oh cool, look at the bottom. Looks like not very much dye could access the bottom either, so we've got similar pink zones on the bottom and the top. I am currently wringing out as much of the, ooh, look at the purples that are starting to peek through. Okay, before I make too much of a tangled mess, I have squeezed out as much of the water as I can easily, and I am going to set our ball of yarn in a bowl. And I'm going to let this sit for a while to just dry out. I mean, there's no way the interior will dry out, and so I'll have to start unraveling it before this ball of yarn is completely dry. but at the very least, letting it sit for 24 hours or so will have it be a bit drier for when I start unraveling it onto a noddy. I am going to film a live stream where I unravel this ball of yarn. But while I am doing that, I'm also going to attempt to film this with my nice camera to get a little time lapse. So fingers crossed that this works and you can watch me unravel it. Here is our pretty gradient. We go from a really dark purple to then kind of a mixed pink, purple, and blue section, and then kind of a tonal variated bright blue section. I am so excited the color penetrated so far into this yarn so that we have bright colors on all of the edges. I just took the yarn off the niddy noddy and I feel like some of the darkest purples were hidden. It's so pretty. To wash this fiber, I'm not expecting any color to really bleed, but it has been drying for a bit, and so who knows, it hasn't been washed yet. But I'm going to add some clear liquid dish soap to my rinse bath, and this is just cool water right here. I do need to be careful because I tied the skein off myself. Here we go. I don't want to tangle anything or have my ties come undone. But that water is clear. So I just need to rinse it a few times to make sure that I remove the soap. This will also help with the vinegar smell that I was mentioning in the live stream. But then I will be able to hang it up to dry. Yay! Oh, this is so pretty, you guys. This gradient is stunning. You start at the darkest purple and then slowly you get more and more pink splotches, and then you start to get some more blue, and finally the purple and pinks decrease until you get almost a semi-solid blue at the very end. I think that this yarn could become a stunning hat or cowl, or you really want something that would really show off this asymmetric nature of this yarn. Is it fair to say that I am obsessed with this colorway? I love the depth of the purple that goes into the brightness of the blue we got at the center of this ball of yarn. I really need to explore adding vinegar in the middle of the dyeing process more, because I think that this allowed us to get some gorgeous colors throughout the entire skein of yarn. There is a hint of teal in this blue. It's slightly greener than what I think I would have gotten with just Wilton's violet on itself, and I think that that's kind of where the delphinium blue comes into play a little bit. Thank you so much for joining me on this fun dyeing experiment where I dyed a hand-wound ball of yarn in a mixture of Wilton's violet and delphinium blue, and we saw the colors break in this spectacular fashion for a gorgeous asymmetric colorway. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and thank you for watching.